Several items on the program today. To begin with, if you'll please rise for the invocation and our pledge of allegiance. Please stand as you are able and bow your heads. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for this beautiful day in the city and county in which we live. Lord, thank you for everyone gathered here today who wants to learn more about how they can be effective with their vote and their service in the marketplace of civic affairs and politics, Lord. There's a great deal of important decisions ahead of our nation this year, Lord. I pray that you'll protect our nation and give us wisdom to make the right decisions. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Amen. Would you please join me for our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I have a few announcements. First off, I'd like to thank Stephen Olligood, Ben Parsons, Nancy Burton, Lawrence Turner, and Adam Baker for signing up as in the registration as sponsors for today. When we sent out that registration link, there, we have that little bitty amount of money that we have to have so that we can actually confirm that you're coming. But for those who gave more than that, $5, $25, I just want to thank you again. Thank you, Stephen Olligood, Ben Parsons, Nancy Burton, Lawrence Turner, Adam Baker. The church graciously allows us to use this facility free of charge, but every month we try to give them a love offering as a thank you. Also have some announcements coming up. We've got this, on Tuesday, there is an election in West Georgia up in Carroll County and Douglas County and Paulding County and Harrelson. If you have friends up there, remind them to vote. There's an election for state senator. Mike Dugan, who is one of the candidates for Congress in our district, resigned to run for Congress, and so there's a special election for his seat. There's 4 Republicans running and 1 Democrat, and there'll be a runoff between the top 2 vote getters if no one gets a majority, and no one's expected to. One of the candidates in particular, Bob Smith, has been endorsed by the Georgia Republican Assembly, the Georgia Freedom Caucus, and our friends like Senator Colton Moore are supporting him. So it'd be great to get Colton some support in the state Senate. In fact, I'm going up there later today to knock on doors. So if no one has anything to do this afternoon, you can come up with me and help with that. Again, that election's on Tuesday. If you got friends in South Paulding, or just make it simple, Paulding, Carroll, Douglas, or Harrelson, you ought to reach out to them and remind them to vote for Bob Smith. Thirdly, we have an announcement about the upcoming caucuses. Our county caucuses to begin the convention process are 2 weeks from today here in this building. We'll be dividing up in that room and have some folks in this room too, just because that room's a bit small, but we'll probably be able to fit in there. There in the fellowship hall here and in this room, we'll be caucusing as individual 25 caucuses, and then in March, of course. How many of y'all have been to the convention before? Raise your hand. Almost all of you have. You've been through the convention process? Raise your hand. Yeah, I'm looking around here. Yeah, almost all of you have. So y'all know the routine. We'll meet here in 2 weeks. We'll fill up the paperwork to be delegates to the county convention. Then a month from now, in March, late March, we'll have our county convention. We'll sign up to go to the state and district convention. There should be room for everyone who wants to go. And then, of course, at the district convention, we'll be electing 3 national delegates. And at the state convention, which will be in Columbus, we'll be electing 14 national delegates as well to represent us in Milwaukee. And a couple of things that are of significant import for the national delegates that we'll be electing to use to determine and who to elect is, there's going to be an issue about transparency on the RNC. There's a movement in the RNC that Tyler Boyer, who's a national committee man from Arizona and the chief operating officer of Turning Point USA, he is pushing to get recorded votes for RNC chair elections. Y'all remember how everyone wanted to get rid of Ronna McDaniel, but she was elected with 66% of the vote? He wants to change the RNC rules to say that now all elections for RNC chair be by roll call recorded vote, so that you can know how your RNC members voted. Well, there's no way the RNC will pass that rule. So it's going to require a change of the national convention, which means that the delegations will have to do it. Each delegation will have to vote on electing a man and a woman to serve on the rules committee at the RNC, right, at the national convention, and then that committee will have to draft that report. Now, we want to elect delegates who say, yes, I want that, and I'll only vote for someone to be on the rules committee who favors that amendment. And in case
the Rules Committee somehow doesn't report that out, we want to elect delegates who will say, I will sign a letter in my delegation calling for that amendment to come out as the minority report. In other words, we want enough people who are so dedicated to reforming the RNC and getting transparency in there that they are prepared, that they're making a credible threat of, if you don't put this on the floor, we will cause all kinds of trouble by saying we want a minority report. That'll be the first time in 40 years there's been a minority report on the floor of the RNC. That alone will probably spook them into doing the right thing. But you all know how all this works in politics. You're only respected by the people like McDaniel only respect you to the extent they fear you, fear what you could do to them politically. I mean, that's not news to any of us. Most of us are grizzled veterans at this point. The other thing you have to be thoughtful of is the platform. It's been 8 years since we've amended our platform. We didn't have a platform change in 2020 because of COVID. So 8 years is a lifetime in politics. There's going to be a ton of things we're going to have to address. The war in Ukraine. We're going to have to address trade policy. We're going to have to address immigration policy. A lot in our party's philosophy has changed somewhat in the last 8 years. And of course, there's elements who want to say that they want to get rid of some of our more socially conservative elements. So when you elect a national delegate, you want to elect somebody and know where they stand on these issues, because they're going to be electing, just like the Rules Committee, they're going to be electing a man and a woman to serve on the platform committee from the Georgia delegation, to go there along with all the other states. There'd be about 100, and think about this, folks. There's about 115 members of the platform committee, right? 2 from each state, plus the territories, and 3 co-chairs of that committee. 115 members, right? I've watched the old hearings of platform committees, proceedings on C-SPAN, because of course I have. When I was delegate in 2012, I watched it because I naively thought I need to follow these proceedings because we might have to vote on floor amendments and things being brought out of committee on the floor and debate on the floor. Turns out we just rubber stamped what the committee did. The point is, it's very important to realize that in that committee, it takes about 40 to 45 votes to win a motion. Because on any given vote, 10 or 20 people are out of the room, and the rest don't really have strong feelings. Because you got to remember, about 40 people on that committee are diehard conservative people like us. About 15 to 20 are social liberals, and the other 50-something are just happy to be there. And they're just looking for signals like, which side am I supposed to be on here? So a lot of them just abstain. So it only takes 45 votes usually to pass an amendment in committee, to change the platform in committee. That's all it takes. It's a pretty big responsibility. We got some good folks who are looking to serve in that role, from Georgia as the committee woman on that committee. I'm hoping to serve as the platform committee man to represent us here in Georgia. So there's a lot of stuff going on that's important as we're sifting through who we're electing as national delegates. We get 3 votes here in Georgia, 3 delegates we get to elect. So in the 3rd district, that is. So it's not like you have to choose one. You can vote for 3 people. And let's see what else I got for you. It's about, important, vice president, right? We want to make sure that the right person gets elected as vice president. So you want to elect national delegates who are willing to state publicly early on, after they're elected, I'm a hard no on a Nikki Haley or someone like her. So that Trump will not even consider the possibility of putting someone like her. Sure, if he chose her or someone like her, yeah, they could force it through the convention for sure. But Trump's people don't want to have a big fight on the floor. They don't want to have hundreds of people screaming, hey! So that will affect their decision making. One of the nice things about President Trump is that he does listen to the crowd. If we're not responding positively to something he's saying, he tends to change the material. So if we give him positive and negative feedback, it will affect his decision-making process, unlike previous Republican nominees who just ignored us, whatever we said, because they were more concerned about their donors and special interests. So there's a couple things to think about as we're in the process of electing a national delegate and coming up here in 2 months. I have a quick report from the Restoring National Confidence Summit. Did anyone watch that? I sent it out to some of y'all. Did anyone watch that or any part of it? It's on Rumble at the Turning Point USA, at the Turning Point USA channel. The Restoring National Confidence, which of course is a play on the RNC out in Las Vegas. It was held right before the winter meeting of the RNC. Y'all remember Jason Thompson. Some of y'all were here. Y'all heard from Jason Thompson a few months ago, who came to speak to us. He's our Republican National Committeeman from Georgia. He was a big Harmony Dillon supporter, was whipping votes for her, helped her a lot. he's actually been endorsed for re-election by Turning Point Action and by Charlie Kirk and by Harmy Dillon. You know, one of the most sought after endorsements this year for National Committee Man, Committee Woman around the nation is going to be Charlie Kirk, Turning Point Action, and Harmy Dillon. Because after all, how many of us in this room wanted to re-elect Ronna McDaniel? You know, how many of this room wanted the National Committee to elect Harmy Dillon or Mike Lindell?
Somebody else.
Like everybody. So so they're going to be, the RNC members are going to be, you know, hustling really hard. And what's going to be so funny is that if all the people who claim they voted for, that they wanted Harmy to win, who are running for re-election, if all those people actually voted for her, she probably would have won. You know how it is. They vote one way up there, and then they come back and say, no, I really wanted her to win. And because it's a secret ballot, right, we can't hold them accountable. That's why we've got to have recorded roll call votes on the RNC. It's very, very important. But at the Restoring National Confidence Summit, they gave us, and I've got a digital copy of this, and we'll be sharing this with our volunteers and precinct officers. They gave me this big red book here with a ton of data, and what they were showing us, they were very kind. Turning Point flew about 70 county chairs out to Las Vegas on their own dime. They flew them out, free charge, no charge to county parties, and they put us up in a hotel there, and we spent 2 days going over the plan for the general election, their plan to help us chase ballots, get people to early vote, get people to absentee vote, and they gave us a ton of data, and they also gave us some real significant stats, folks. I mean, I'm not surprising anyone here, but when you look at the numbers the left has had, you realize that the left, according to this report, has 2,000 people doing voter chasing efforts here in Georgia. Between the DNC and the various Democrat ally groups, they're looking at 2,000 staff here in Georgia, 1,200 in Arizona, 450 in Wisconsin. And when you look at, and so basically, we have got to find a way to counter this. And Turning Point, some of y'all know Orien, with Turning Point Action, who's been here before, young fellow with a beard.
Yeah, he's right here.
Oh, there he is. I'm manifesting. I speak it. There he is. Yeah, Ryan, why don't you come up here and add whatever I forget? Y'all need to get an app. Y'all need to get the Turning Point Action app. We're going to have some Republican resources as well. That being said, though, as y'all know, sometimes the stuff we've been provided by the state, by the National Party, has been less than stellar. Turning Point Action has a great app. It's a blue app. If you look it up in the App Store, your Google Play Store, if you download that, I highly recommend you do that. And then there's a little arrow at the top right. It's going to point to the beginning. When you first download it, it's going to have news articles and such. But if you go to the top left, click the little arrow, you're going to see things like help knock doors, contact sign up. And the cool part is you can take your contacts that you have in your phone, and you can rate them yourself, as many as you want. Obviously, you can't rate them all at once, but you can rate them. Are they a Republican or Democrat? Here's why. The left has very successfully done this. They have gotten people to take apps like this and rate their own contacts, and then this information the Democrats get so that they know to ignore or support somebody. I mean, you know how the data, when you've gone door to door, you know how sometimes the data is wrong or people aren't there. There's 8 people registered at the home, but only 2 actually live there. This is the way that Turning Point is giving us the tools the Democrats have to actually get good data on people. When it says they're an independent voter, if Turning Point can get 3 people around the state, because I mean your friends on your contacts have friends all over the state, if 3 people download this app, upload their contacts and say, yeah, he's a Republican, and if 3 people say that about a guy who's listed as an independent, that's hard evidence that we know, okay, we need to get him to early vote, we need to get him to get absentee ballot. And there's others who we say are Democrats who we don't identify, because this is all about chasing our voters. This isn't about outreach. This is about chasing our voters. Politics in Georgia at this point is a turnout-based model. Conversation, persuasion, that's a very small part of it. It's mainly turnout people who already tend to agree with you. So, and this is the coolest part of all, if you were to click Help Knock Doors on this thing, you can see a feature that says Voters Near Me, and I'm doing it right now. And what happens is any voter, that a list of voters that we need to target is right here within a mile radius, comes up right here. And they only give you a few at a time, so that if you can't do it or don't do it, then it'll just go back into the system, so you're not, holding something that needs to be done by someone else. But literally, if you had 10 flyers right now or telling people to early vote for the general election, whatever, if this were 3 months from now, 4 months from now, you could take your flyers right now from this meeting, click voters near me, go to that meeting, leave this meeting, go to those addresses right now with this app, and give them the thing, have that, and update their information. As Turning Point put it, as Tyler put it, we took a bunch of 80-year-olds, spun them around a few times, and then gave them this app and said, okay, can you figure this out? They didn't literally spin them around, but the point is they beta tested it heavily. They beta tested it heavily on older folks because they know that people over 60 are going to be doing the bulk of this kind of work. So they made sure, they basically took all the complaints and the issues that had happened from those other apps and said, okay, let's get one that is not going to have those problems. And they beta tested it by asking a bunch of people over 60, can you figure this out? And they did, and it makes sense. After all, your prime workers, you don't need it to be something that only 30-year-olds or 20-year-olds can understand, because that's not the people who do most of your work. So yeah, this app is really fantastic, and I'm sure that the RNC in time will learn to copy it, because this is so much more user-friendly, than what we've had in the past. And let's see, what else have we got here? What have I missed, Ryan?
I mean, the fact that we have a stack rank precinct breakdown, so it has the most chaseable ballots per precinct broken down from highest to lowest. Congratulations, Coweta County. You are a super chase county, which means you have at least 2 or more precincts with 200 voters that are not voting, that are Republicans. Not to mention, this is some other good news. I sat on a call on Wednesday, and well, we're getting the rest of the Georgia GOP involved in the Turning Point Action app. The Georgia GOP has signed a contract, and now the Georgia GOP will be getting its own variant of this app. So that means you can use the Turning Point Action app, or you can use the Georgia GOP app. They will function identically the same. But gone are the days of cutting walk lists and all the middleman. The focus is on the precinct, okay? We're focusing on, if you don't win your street, you cannot win your county, okay? You cannot win your street, you cannot win your precinct, you cannot win your county, we cannot win the state. That is how we are going to save our country, is by winning our street. So what we need to do is we need to be the pillars of our community. That means, some of our people are more mobilely able, some of them are not. So if you could bake cookies and then go through that app and be like, hey, I got some fresh cookies I just made, would you be interested? The goal is to build relationships. Every 4 years, we go to our voters and we're like, hey, will you vote for our president? That doesn't work. That turns off voters. People look at the media. If we want to get away from the way the media is treating us, we need to have relationships with people in our communities. We're going to be hosting block parties. We're building coalitions. In fact, I'll give you Paulding County as an example because it's one of my big main counties. In 3 precincts, there are 6,000 Christians that are not voting. There are another 4,000 mothers in another 4 precincts that are not voting. And so this is not just a small issue. So our goal is to build these coalitions to be able to engage with them. One of our other coalitions is our Farmers Coalition. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a city boy from Milton. I don't know nothing about farming. So it doesn't make sense to have a guy like me talking to farmers about farming issues. The goal is to empower those demographics to talk to their neighbors, talk to their friends, talk to people of those like-minded demographics to help get out the vote. And so we're going to be hosting awesome events throughout this year. I've already got some planned. And if you'd like to join in and have some fun before we get started for the general election, we'd love to have you. But the goal is to have those coalitions, energize the base, because honestly, the mainstream media is going to be 100% against us this entire cycle. So if you want to come join us, we'd love to have you. The Georgia GOP app will be rolling out here really soon. I'll have training information that I can send to Brant. And I would love for everyone to help save this country. We save our neighborhoods, we save our counties, we save our country. Period, end of story. Thank you, Brant.
Thank you. Barry?
You said the Democrats have 2,000 on the ground. How many do we have on the ground?
That's a number that's building up at the moment. I don't have the answer to that at the moment, I'm sorry. Wish I
Brad,
did.
before you
Yes, sir?
step on the remote,
There's a pamphlet they gave us too, this booklet. As he was saying, we're one of the top target areas. There are, in this list here, there's 1,018 precincts listed here in Georgia. And out of the 1,018 precincts, the Arts Center, where many of y'all live, Noonan Crossing, the Arts Center, you go vote up there. Ben, you live in that precinct, and most of y'all do, and many of y'all do as well. That is number 8 out of 1,018, the top 1% of targeted county precincts. And why? Because there are 1,630 ballots that need to be chased. People who aren't voting, who are Republicans. 1,630 in that count, in that precinct alone. I mean, the Arts Center precinct is so huge that if it were its own county, it would be one of the top half in population and in Republican voters in this state. And that's just, that's 8. No, the top priority is Lumpkin County, Dahlonega. There's 3,000 there. But we're number 8 out of 1,018. And we're also in Madras, where Jennifer, you live, and a lot of y'all live, Madras. That's number 43 out of 1,018. The top 4%. Because in Madras, we have 880 voters who need to be chased down and get them to vote in the way that Ryan was describing. Are there any more questions about my report this time? And yes, ma'am.
It's not well advertised, but the 12th, 2 days from now, is the last day to register to vote for the March 12th
That's right.
election or change your address.
That's
So
right.
if you've got 18-year-olds, whatever, that didn't register to vote, they've got 2 days to do it for the March 12th election, and then it'll be moved up to the 20th.
Correct.
So early voting starts on President's Day, the 19th.
Thank you for reminding us of that. On the ballot has about 8 or close to 10 candidates, because last October they let just about everyone who asked to be put on the ballot, including 1 or 2 very long shot candidates, was put on the ballot here in Georgia. So you've got everybody from a guy I never heard of, and that Ryan Binkley guy from Texas, to Trump and Haley are on it, and DeSantis and Scott, and all of them are still on it. But of course, since the race is largely statistically over at this point, and there's only 2 candidates still running, we anticipate that it'll be overwhelming. There was a poll came out that showed something like 80%, I think it was 80 to 15 in Georgia, 80 for Trump, 15 for Haley. So we expect this to be a very overwhelming margin, even in the parts of the state that historically in 2016 weren't as favorable. I expect Trump to even carry Fulton County and the Buckhead area by large margins. So that election, I'm going to vote as early as I can on that one, just to get it out of the way, because we got other things, and we know it's going to be a landslide for Trump. So I'm just going to go vote for him and get that over with as fast as we can, so that we can move on to the next project. And the faster we can get that race done with, the sooner we can get to the general election. So let's clean that out. And since we were talking, any other questions about this before we move on to a couple of our speakers, Ms. Nancy and some others? Just a second. Yes, Deb?
You may not know this answer, but how are precinct lines drawn? If you have a situation where it's
Used to be with a crayon.
so much population in one place,
Uh-huh.
eventually you're not going to be able to handle all the people that want to come and vote.
You're right.
We have the census, we redraw district lines and commissioner lines and school lines, so how are precinct lines determined, and
That's a good question.
is there a limit to how many people can be in a precinct?
I believe there is a limit. Yeah, I believe there is a limit based on how many machines you have in capacity. There's a square footage rule and a certain amount of voting machines rule. I believe that's in the law. Basically, if you have a venue large enough, in theory, you can have as many people voting in it. Believe it or not, there are precincts in North Georgia where there's only 1 precinct in the county, and in South Georgia too, and you may have 10,000, 15,000 registered voters there, and they all vote at one place. The In Coweta, we actually have pretty decent in terms of the precinct lines. They're not ridiculous squiggly. They don't go to municipal boundaries, so they're not crazy. The shapes are actually fairly decent, but the population does get big because what happened is in the Art Center precinct and in Madras, they combined two precincts. Jefferson Parkway was merged into the Art Center, so now it's this mega precinct. And Madras and Cedar Creek were consolidated because what they've been doing is they've been trying to consolidate voting into county-owned buildings and not using churches and other private institutions or schools that are a little harder to get full access to. You know, they're kind of dependent on the church's schedule or the whatever other building schedule it is. So they're trying to get it into county places. It does make it a little easier for us as Republicans in terms of getting precinct chairs. If we don't have 50 precincts, it's easier when you have 25. Also, it's easier for us to cover caucuses. But there is definitely a good point to be made that if the precinct is too large and it can't be serviced, then you're doing a disservice. But other than the capacity, other than the square footage to voters thing, Debbie, I don't think there's any limit theoretically on how big a precinct could be in law, provided you have a building big enough, like the like the Nixon Center out there. In theory, it could be as big as you want. Yes, sir.
So back to so what's the definition of a precinct? Is a precinct not supposed to have the same ballot for each party in case of primary or general? Because it seems to me if they combine precincts, and you got a voting center, you don't have a precinct.
Well, yeah, the precinct is precinct. I can't tell you the origin of the word itself, the etymology of it, but
In Georgia law, there should
No,
be a law that.
a precinct is just a place. A precinct is just a place where you go to vote. It's a geographic area that is within whose limits you go to vote in one particular spot. And of course now, because of early voting and absentee ballots, absentee voting, you really have 4 precincts. You can go vote in East Coweta over there. You can go vote in downtown. Well, I say downtown. You go to the theater. Now you don't go to downtown. You go to the old theater where they now have. You can vote there. You can vote over there at East Coweta, the library, or you can vote in your precinct on election day, or you can vote by absentee ballot. So there's really 4 methods, 4 precincts, if you will. But the term precinct just means a geographic location, like a city ward, in which you are voting, in which on election day you can go vote. Now, there is a little technicality in the law. If you, for some reason, can't get to your precinct in time, you can, let's say you're driving back from Atlanta, commuting, and there's traffic from Atlanta. I know it's hard to believe, traffic in Atlanta, hard to believe, but bear with me for this thought experiment. You're driving from the north side trying to get back and it's getting really late, and you live down in Moreland or Grantville and you're not going to make it down to the south end of the county to your precinct by 7 o'clock. You could get off the road and go to the Canongate or Madras or Fisher Road precinct close to the interstate on the north end of the county. You could go in and vote there and say why you're there voting. And they'll say, all right, you can file a provisional ballot, which means that the ballot you'll have to go back to the to the election office by Friday to confirm that you are that you actually do vote, have a voting, a registered vote in the other precinct. They'll count your ballot. It's kind of like the Good Samaritan law, you might say. So in an extreme situation, you theoretically could vote in another precinct, but you have to pay for it, not with money, but you have to pay for it by the hassle of having voted there. You're going to have to come back in a couple of days to the county election office and prove to them and bring documentation that you are actually registered to vote in that other precinct that you weren't able to get to in time. Any other questions? Ms. Nancy?
You mentioned a couple of apps in a meeting with Turning Point.
Yeah.
Will you send out a notice about that information so we'll have it in writing, or do you want to give it to us?
The report, I was giving you the report about our meeting in Las Vegas. The training that Orien talked about, yes, you'll definitely get notice about that. And the current app, like I said, that you can study now and kind of get familiar with is the TP Action, Turning Point USA Action app. So it's a blue app in the App Store. There's a little blue app with the name's TP Action on it. And if you download that, it's really easy to work with. And there's a little arrow in the top left where you can see there's articles, and the top left arrow will take you to the section where you can take action. So with that, I'm going to invite Miss Nancy up here to talk to you for a minute or two about her race for national delegate. She's coming up. Traveled all over the district. That alone, she'll get my vote. We each get 3 votes. We each get to vote for 3 people. She'll get one of my votes just on the basis of her hard work, if nothing else.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. I think I've spoken to most people. If you have not gotten a copy of my letter, please meet me at the door after the meeting and get one. It gives information about who I am and have been in the past. I'm a newcomer in this area, and so I want to get to know everybody. That's why I come to all the meetings, because I think, it's great to know the people we're going to be working with. And I want to be your ear when I go to the National Convention in Milwaukee, and be sure that I vote for the right person. And you know who that is. Anyway, I've been a teacher for 41 years, so I tend to talk too long, and I promised him 1 minute. But I brought my banker with me, Jim Burton, and I'm trying to talk him into going to Milwaukee with me.
Please do not vote for her. It will cost me a fortune. Plus, she can't walk up the steps. She can't have steps in I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's going to cost somewhere between 5 and 10,000 when all's said and done for most folks. And on top of that, if you're a real glutton for punishment like me and are hoping to run and serve on the platform committee, I'll have to go a week early, and so that's even more expense. So they don't make it cheap, that's for sure. I want to ask Nina to come up and give us an update on the Young Republicans. Nina Black, is she still in the room? Oh no, there she is. Come on. Yeah, and some really exciting news, which I found out this morning. Nina is now the acting chairman of the whole state Young Republicans here in Georgia. Which means that those of you who are under 40 are now obliged to come to the convention in April and vote for her for re-election with me.
Right. Hey friends, I just wanted to remind everybody that Georgia Young Republicans, we are having a convention in April, so we need to round up everybody under 40 who is very conservative so we can have a strong presence there at our convention rolling around. Additionally, we have a day of action February 29th at the Capitol. I've established a policy steering committee, so again, if you know somebody who's under 40, at least 18 years old, that's interested in getting involved in a policy steering committee, that's an opportunity to do so before we take those talking points and those recommendations. We're meeting specifically with the Future Caucus, which is the under 45 caucus at the State House, which is really exciting. For those who don't know, we have 10 active chapters of Georgia Young Republicans in the state, all the way from Hall County to Savannah. We've got a chapter here that covers Coweta, Fayette, and Meriwether. In 2022, we had 600,000 voter contacts, and the heavy lifting was in about 100 members regularly, and then of course you have our stragglers. But I don't take up too much time. I just want to give an update on the Georgia Young Republicans, who's one of the recognized allied organizations of Georgia GOP. And currently we have 8 members on the state committee, which is very exciting. So our intention in this next convention cycle in Columbus is to, again, of course, have more young people on the state committee. So thank you guys so much, and thank you, Brant.
You say 8?
Yes, 8.
Well, 3 of them are from the 3rd district, you, me, and Katie. So
That's right.
That's 3 out of 8. That's 25%, pretty near. Between 20 and 25%. I think we have 15 voting members total, so that's 20, counting the district chair. So with that, I'm going to move to our final speaker, our featured speaker of the day, Philip Singleton. The great thing about Philip is y'all all know him. Y'all know his record, serving as our state representative. Y'all remember when he was a founding member of the Freedom Caucus. Many of y'all volunteered in his first campaign in 2019, as we did. And y'all remember in 2021 when we all went up to the Capitol to speak out against what they did and redrawing him out of his seat. He'd still be our representative today if it weren't for that. And of course, the whole North Coweta had to be sacrificed, Madras Precinct, and all of North Coweta had to be put into a Democrat seats. In fact, we lost a whole House seat just in their desire to get rid of Philip. So Philip's now working in Washington as Chief of Staff for Congressman Richard McCormick, and of course, you all know he is a candidate for Congress. So with that, without further ado, the gentleman needs no introduction. Our friend Philip Singleton.
Well, it's hard to follow Nancy, but thanks for the, thank you for the crowd, so that I can, in fact, you know what, I gotta move this out of the way so that when I take a video, they don't know that the only reason anyone's listening is because of Nancy. You know?
Grant, thank you for the endorsement.
All right, now, when you take the video, take it from this angle so no one knows that the only reason there's a crowd is because Nancy was here. So no, all joking aside, it's great to see you guys again. Running for Congress has been interesting so far. There are some new faces here that I haven't met before, which just is a testament to how good the Coweta GOP is doing, growing. So it's good to see some of you. By a show of hands, who's never listened to me talk before? Okay, those are the blessed ones. Okay, I'm going to give you guys just a Reader's Digest, and then everybody else will tell you kind of my story, more details. But I'm from Fay County originally. I'm a Peachtree City kid. Grew up there with my dad. I met my wife, Julie, in the back. Julie, stand up and say hi. By far the better Singleton, like seriously. I met her in middle school at Grace Evangelical Church. And we started dating in high school, and we've been together ever since. I think we've been married. I don't know why I just said that because I'll get the date wrong. I'm in trouble. But in April, it will be 21 years. Yes, she nodded her head. Okay. So 21 years in April. We have 4 kids, Timothy, Denver, Tyler, and Emma. I left, well, let's see. Well, I went to Georgia State University. I was pre-med there. I wanted to be a doctor. I just wanted to serve and help people. And then when 9/11 happened, I was a sophomore at Georgia State when September 11th happened. And 9 days later, I joined the Army. I joined the Army National Guard. Became an 11-mile infantryman out of Winder, Georgia while I was finishing college. Decided that it was very cold and wet as an infantryman, which is true. And you don't sleep very much, which is also true. And so I was like, man, I want to fly. And so when I commissioned active duty, I went to flight school at Fort Rucker. I was blessed enough to be able to fly Apaches. Only intended on doing a couple of years of service, as you guys know. Woke up one day and I had served for 15 years at that point, and 13 years active. Had a wife and 4 kids, 3 deployments, 1 through Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. And God was just calling us home to Georgia to come continue serving here. So moved home to Georgia. Didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I got to be honest with you, I was really pissed off politically when I moved home. So keep in mind, my last 2 years of service, I was in Korea. And pretty much everything that came out of President Obama's mouth at the time was a lie about what was going on in Korea. And I knew it because I was on the border of the DMZ. We were doing overseas operations. We saw what KJU was doing. So I got back in 2017. I was very, let's just say, motivated to try to continue my service. So I ran for someone that I thought was not a very good representative at the time. Drew Ferguson was our congressman. So I decided to run against Drew. Now this is, keep in mind, I had no idea what I was doing. I was straight up, I mean, anyone who was here back then will tell you, I mean, it was like, it was a situation. I just was like, man, I'm pissed, and I think we have bad representation, so I'm gonna run. Right after I started running, I got hired by American Airlines to be a pilot for PSA, one of their regional carriers. So I ended up leaving to go learn how to be a fixed wing pilot, because keep in mind, I was a helicopter pilot. So the transition from real helicopter pilot to glider pilot is a pretty smooth, easy transition, but it takes a long time. I got to do a lot of hours. So came back right before that election in March. Didn't do great in that election. I think we got like 27%. I think maybe 26% of it just knew they didn't like Drew. Maybe 1% of it was my family and friends. But that's the nature of elections. And then God was like, that's okay. We opened another door. And our state house rep, David Stover, who's a friend, decided to not run for re-election. Actually, he left the seat early. And so God's like, hey, run for this seat. So we're like, okay, we'll run for this seat. And about 2 weeks, I think, to the day after we announced we were running for that seat, the congressman's daughter decided to run against us, Marcy Westmoreland. And for those who watched that race know that everybody said it was unwinnable. We couldn't beat her. She had Governor Deal and David Perdue and Johnny Isaacson, and I think Jesus might have even at one point said that he endorsed her, I don't know, but that they certainly said that he did. So we just kept running and tried to stay positive and share our message of limited government freedom, and I was very honest with my thoughts about the Speaker of the House at the time, and just told the truth, and God blessed us, and we won that race, which was a miracle.
You smoked her.
Yeah, we smoked her. So we smoked her. Well, that had a lot to do with you guys too. I mean, you guys were out there working, and it was a grassroots thing for sure. And then I started serving in the legislature, and those who know that story, it was an entertaining experiment. So the Georgia State House, I tell you, Washington is broken, but nobody's got anything. Nobody can hold a candle to how corrupt Atlanta is. You guys are telling me, it's insane. And so all I did was, I was really, really bold enough to stand up and just do exactly what I said I would do on the campaign trail. So 2019, sponsored Save Girl Sports. That didn't go over well. That went over like a bag of bricks. The leadership at the time thought there was a solution without a problem. I told them they're wrong. How about we solve it in Georgia before it becomes a problem? They told me I was wrong. Well, I'm still right, by the way. It's still a problem. Worked with ADF to fix that bill, make it better. It's passed in, I think, 24 states now, the version of the bill that we wrote. Not Georgia, though. Don't worry. We haven't passed it in Georgia. But 24 states have passed that to protect our young women. Then just kept fighting with leadership on everything. It felt like, just limited government, it's an interesting feeling standing up, being the only guy voting no on a budget, the only guy voting no on these things that were just obviously bad and outside of our platform. So 2021, I was blessed to be selected to be a Club for Growth Fellow, which has been a great experience. And then in late 2021, I launched the Freedom Caucus Network with my friends Andy Roth and Justin May. They're now in 11 states, by the way. It's thriving and it's making a huge impact on the country. So it's really fun to watch the waves of that movement. My repercussions for that, you guys remember very well. Actually, I think it wasn't just the Freedom Caucus Network. The mental health bill had a lot to do with it as well. But it was a perfect storm when the census came out, and there was a big mental health bill moving through the legislature. It was just so you know, it was just a Medicaid, Medicare expansion bill. Had some little bit of red flag laws thrown in there for good measure. Free trial confinement, due process limitations. It was just a really bad bill, so I stood up against that. Still my favorite moment in the State House was going down to be the only one to speak against the bill on the floor in front of 179 other legislators and the speaker behind me, and I could just hear him breathing. He was so pissed off when I was speaking against it. But he was so pissed off that when I got done speaking against the bill and went back down to my seat amongst all the liberal Democrats, because that's where they put me as punishment. So my seat was around the Black Caucus, it was fun because we actually had a grand old time. They were fun to sit with. But he came down to the well, which he never does, and spoke in favor of the bill immediately after I spoke against it. And then took it to a vote. I believe it was 3 of us that voted against it. And then we took it to the Senate, and we were able to kill the bad provisions in the Senate. Again, that largely had to do with the other members that had the courage to stand up with me. I give credit to Charlie Spurd, and Sherry Gilligan, and then our friends in the Senate. So, lo and behold, he decided to draw me out. Those who remember who here went to the Capitol to help me fight against that craziness? You guys are patriots, but we went to fight against it. Ironically, I was the only member of the Coweta or Fayette delegation that actually voted against the map, which is insane to me, because they just totally bastardized the districts in our district. And 234 members of the legislature. You have 54 senators and 180 House members. I was the only incumbent Republican that was drawn out of his district. There were 2 others that were drawn out that were retiring, so they weren't really drawn out. They were retiring anyway. So that's the nature of the beast. They drew a line right down there by Shoal Creek Forest, the street that my house is on, the neighborhood I lived in, back up into Fulton County, and like that, my 80% Republican district became a 62% or whatever the numbers were Biden district. I don't remember the exact numbers. If you need to know the exact numbers, talk to Brant Frost after this meeting. He can tell you to the 7th decimal point. So we, God had a bigger plan for me. God had a bigger plan. Those who don't know me, I only have one mode, and that's just charge forward. Some say it's a character defect, I don't know, but that's what I do, is I charge forward and I keep winning for all of us, and so that's what I do, is I just fight for us. So, got out a bigger plan. After they drew me out, I wasn't gonna be able to win re-election. I didn't know how God was gonna have me keep serving. I felt like I wasn't done serving yet. I'm still fairly young despite the hairdo. And so we just said, God, how are we gonna keep serving? And my good friend, Marine doctor and ER doctor, Marine helicopter pilot, Rich McCormick, who I know is a friend with over the last couple of years, is like, screw those guys, come be my chief in DC. And so I was like, oh, that would be an interesting change of pace. So Julie and I prayed about it, and we decided to do it. So for the last year, really since January of last year, I've been the chief of staff in DC, learning firsthand what's going on with the swamp and how it works. It's been an eye-opening experience. Those who know me know that. Here's a pitch to you guys. There are plenty of people in Washington that want to stand up at a podium and tell you what's wrong. There's disturbingly, punishingly, painfully few that have spent any time on the strategic vision or plan to fix it. It's very easy to stand up and say, this is what I believe. I'm for school choice. I want school vouchers. But they have no idea how to achieve it, how to make it happen. And I sit in a meeting every Tuesday with a bunch of HFC chiefs. So my boss is not in the HFC. I go to every HFC meeting. Our LD goes to every HFC meeting. We are. I jokingly say that we're more HFC than a lot of the HFC members. My boss does a great job with fiscal issues, but there's almost never a strategy. There's very few members that really have a strategic plan. One exception I would say would be Chip Roy. He's a guy that will sit in a room and everyone will be like, I hate this. Yeah, this is BS. I hate this too. Yeah, these people suck. I hate this. And he'll be like, so how do we fix it? And I was like, I don't know, but I hate it. Well, okay, I do too. And so that's one thing that I have always brought. It's one thing I brought to my boss, and I'll give an example. We had everyone knows who Rashid Tlaib is, correct?
Yes.
Okay. She said some ridiculously racist comments and remarks when October 7th happened. Very anti-Semitic, in my opinion, un-American. And so there was an effort to censure her. It was led by Marjorie Taylor Greene. She started the effort. But she did it on her own. And there was some pushback with the House caucus, which, to be fair, there's always pushback in the House caucus with everything. So that's the nature of the conference right now. And so that measure went forward, and we offered assistance to the best of our ability to say, hey, we think this is important, and we want this to pass. We think this censure is important. Well, it failed on the floor by over 20 votes. I believe it failed pretty badly. And so my boss went to her and said, hey, afterwards said, hey, I think that this is important. Let me help you try to get it across the finish line. I'm not going to recant how the whole conversation go, but the conversation didn't go very well. So my boss came back to me and said, hey, Philip, this is important, but I don't know how we can get it done. I'm like, well, how bad do you want it to get done? He's like, I think this is important. Let's get it done. And so we set out for the next 72 hours coming up with a strategy. How do we actually get a censure resolution passed in the chamber that we have, right? It's not the chamber that you want, it's the chamber that you have. And we came up with a strategy, and about 72 hours later, we passed a censure resolution for Rashid Tlaib, sponsored by my boss, Rich McCormick. The difference there was strategy. It was a strategic vision, building friends, and know that the result matters. So it's not just enough to stand up at a podium and be pissed off. You have to have a way to get things done. You have to be able to move stuff. So that's what I've learned in my year in Washington, is how to build those relationships. We're blessed in this race. I think the district is blessed in this race. There's a lot of good men running, and the race could change. There could be more people that enter the race. Like, we just don't know that. And I was telling Julie the other day that the one thing that's been the last couple of weeks that I've enjoyed most is I've got to see my friend Mike Crane 2 weekends in a row. They used to be a litmus test on how my weeks are going. So it's great to see Mike. So this race comes up to you guys. You're going to have good choices. You're going to have the ability to choose who you want to go forward and who you want to represent you. I will tell you, whoever you choose, you've got to get involved in their race. You've got to get involved. If you think the establishment's is not willing to spend $2 million to make sure that someone that will benefit them financially wins, then you're not paying attention to American politics. So the only way that someone that is not beholden to the establishment wins is if you guys get involved and we don't let them win. And I'm telling you, we don't have to spend as much as them to win. Our message, limited government and liberty, is a good message, and it's real. And by the way, when we get up there and we're fighting in the trenches, it wins. You don't have near as many members in Congress that are fighting for limited government, and yet look at what's happened this year, right? They're having to pass continuing resolutions on suspension. Now, if you know anything about the way that works, that means they are having to rely on Democrats to pass continuing resolutions, because the Republican conference is moving more and more to the right. And the small member of Freedom Caucus, my friends and allies up there, are slowly moving the needle. And so you say, well, you know, what do you do? Well, one member makes a big difference. Did you see what just happened with the Mayorkas impeachment? Yeah. How many votes matter, guys? One. One. It failed with one vote. So every vote matters. So here's my pitch to you guys, and I'm repeating myself. You got to get involved in the race. You got to be willing to make phone calls. You got to be willing to knock doors, and you got to be willing to give ammunition. You know, I could go out and spread my message. I know that what I'm saying is true and right and good, but you have to have resources to be able to share the message. Because believe it or not, you guys are the most educated in the district, but you don't get to vote. You're not Democrats, so you don't get to vote 200,000 times. You only get to vote once. Right, and you know, God forbid, you know, this is the first election I think that I've had some loved ones that have passed away, so I know they're voting against me. So it's important to get out there and vote and support your members. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna stand up a minute. I'm not gonna talk to you, I'm gonna talk to these people.
Yes, sir.
You stole my thunder with the redistricting thing. That sucked. That said a lot about our state Republican delegation.
Yep.
But I'll give you another reason why we need to question their integrity, maybe. How can you muck it up any worse? You have two conservative Republican United States senators, and they lose both seats. You're talking about the importance of one vote. That's the difference between us having Senate control and us not having Senate control. That's true. This guy, I'll get specific to Philip. I'm not too good at listening to a speech and being convinced about much of anything. I got to talk to them. I got to hear them. I got to smell them maybe sometimes if you've been out on the campaign trail a bunch. But first time I met you, we were at Sprayberry's barbecue. You spent about 5 minutes, which is your 15 minutes. Everybody else is 5 minutes. But after the meeting was over, you and Julie and myself were walking out together, and we stood there for about a half an hour. I know you don't remember this, because there's been 1,000 people, 10,000 people since then. But I would poke the bear, ask a question, make a comment, and you weren't interested in what I thought. You didn't know anything about what I thought. You told me how you would represent me if you were elected. Think about how novel that is. That he didn't care about what I thought. He was going to tell me how he was going to represent me if he got elected. How rare that is. So I brought some of my wife's money today. I don't have any of my own. I want to encourage everybody here to get off your pocketbook. You didn't bring it with you. Find out how to contribute to Philip's campaign, because he's the man of us. He's the man of the people, and we need him up there. Here's $500. So.
Oh, wow. Well, I just got chills, man. I can't follow that. I mean, that just kind of brings you to tears a little bit. But because I got to tell you, there's a lot of times you feel like you're all alone, especially campaigning. You know, you're running against friends sometimes. You're running against people you love, and you're just trying to run for something. But you know, here's what I promise you guys. And I told you this when I got drawn out. You guys remember that. Those who were here when I came and I talked about the redistricting, I promised you all that I was not done fighting. They don't get to tell me when I'm done fighting. I'll tell them when I'm done fighting. And that's what I've done, and I've stayed in the fight, and my wife is a saint. So we've sacrificed a ton. Our personal time, our wealth, our treasure, our talents, we've sacrificed everything in my family to serve you guys because that's what's important. So that means a lot to me. And I want to give you guys a Reader's Digest. I apologize if you let me have a tangent, but what he's talking about, our Democratic Republic is at risk. It's at risk right now, and it's at risk for two main reasons. Brant's going to tell you that there's actually 37 reasons, and he's actually right. But I want you to focus on the two that I want to talk about. One, people don't tell you the damn truth. So they'll look you in the eye, they'll tell you what you want to hear, which is why I like to focus on what I have done and what I am doing, not what I believe, because it's easy to trick you into thinking I believe something you don't. And people do that all the time in politics. You see it every day. And that means that you can't vote for the right person based on their beliefs. And the second thing is, too many politicians want to look at polling or what's popular and allow the voters to determine how they are going to represent those voters. Let me tell you guys a secret about a Democratic Republic. That shouldn't be a secret. It's my job to tell you what I believe and how I think and what I'm going to do, and then make the best decisions with the information I'm given when I'm in that seat that you know is based off the principles that I aspire to. It's not my job to go up there and vote the way you want me to vote. That's not how it works. If you want to vote the way you want me to vote, then you need to run for office and get elected, and then you get to go up and vote. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time. Some of these votes, there'll be something you love and something you despise and wrapped up in the same package. And you're like, well, now what the heck do I do? So it's a struggle. But it's not about what's popular. It's about what's right based off the principles that you believe in. I know I probably went over, because I always go over. I don't even know what my time is. But do I have time, Brent, to answer questions?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm curious. You talk about the House Freedom Caucus and McCormick. As chief, I assume you have outsized influence. If you guys are so aligned with the Freedom Caucus on economics, why is McCormick not in the Freedom Caucus? I mean, have you pushed for that? What's the deal? And did he vote against McCarthy as well?
So it's kind of a tricky spot. Let me tell you what it means to be a chief. What it means to be a chief is that your boss, the congressman that's accountable to the elected members, it's your job to execute their vision and their will, not your vision and your will. So it's like being, have you ever served in the military?
No.
Okay. I didn't know. So it's like being the XO in a brigade, which I did that as well in Korea, largest brigade in the world. When the commander says take a hill, you take the hill. And you do everything you can to minimize the casualties and make sure you take that hill the best you can. Sometimes you disagree that that's a hill that should be taken. And I have disagreed with my boss on multiple occasions. But those are private, and those are going to stay between him and I. Because as a chief, it's desired to take a hill. Now, if you want to ask me about what I believe about a principle, I'll tell you all day long. And those who know me knows that I will tell you what I believe, and I stick to it. And that's honestly, for you guys, that was the hardest conversation I had when I finally made the decision to run, is I had to go sit down with Rich in the office and say, people are going to ask me what I think on things like the Ukraine war, where we deviate, and I'm going to tell them the truth. And that could damage some of the things you're trying to do behind the scenes in Washington. Are you willing to take that risk with me? Because we don't always agree. And to his credit, he said, Philip, I think you're a great man, I support you, and I'm willing to take the risk. So that's, I hope I directly enough answered your question
So
without
are you
getting,
still working
I don't want
with
to go down
McCormick?
the rabbit trail. I do still work for Dr. McCormick.
Interesting. Now, I saw he proposed a bill not very long ago talking about, well, basically he was trying to expand legal immigration. There was this H-1B visa deal that he was working on to get rid of the caps on foreign countries, expand legal workers' immigration. Are you opposed to that?
Yeah, without getting into the nuances of the legislation, that bill is not going to move this Congress. But there are efforts underway to reform legal immigration as the counterpunch to reforming illegal immigration. So Dr. McCormick believes, and I actually agree with him in this belief, is that you have to both make sure that it's appropriate and accurate and trackable when someone wants to come here legally, that the process is doable and accomplishable. And at the same time, make sure you can't come in illegally. Because if you slam the door shut and you make sure that there's no legal process that's being followed, and by the way, the biggest problem we have with H-1Bs right now is you'll have legal immigrants trying to come that are waiting for 12, 15, sometimes 18 years, and because there's country caps based off of where you're from. If you're from India, for example, they're the ones that we have the most immigrants that want to come from India. But if you're from Iran, you will get in instantly, because we have such a small number of people coming from them that they're under the cap. So a big part of the provision that Dr. McCormick is working on is making sure malign countries such as China, Iran, Russia, Pakistan, that they have very strict, much lower caps than those other countries that are friends and allies.
Well, I think the biggest
Anybody,
problem.
I'm going to open up to anybody else. Does
Well, the
anybody else
biggest
have any
problem with
questions?
the H-1B visas is that they exist. I mean, I have buddies who are graduating college that are fighting to get jobs in the big four tech sectors that are just getting completely undercut by low wages H-1B visa recipients. Now, I know there's a cap. There's a minimum wage in the H-1B visa system and program, but this isn't, just inadequate, it's an antique from the 80s and 90s.
Dr. McCormick's bill, and again, I know you're just itching to get into the policy discussion, but
Right.
Dr. McCormick's bill does raise all those caps to try to minimize that, because there is truth to that. And there's a lot of H-1B fraud too. So trying to fix the legal immigration system, I don't know if you guys know this, but it's not simple. And one of the biggest problems we have in immigration, which is why my office needs to go, is that we have a lot of laws that you try to reform, but it's very hard to fix it when they don't follow the laws that exist to begin with. So trying to enforce them, that's why the impeachment was so important, because enforce the dang laws that you have. There's been no meaningful change in immigration law since Obama. No meaningful change. There's been tweaks. But the difference between Obama and Biden is that Obama came after Clinton, who was an immigration hawk, and Obama enforced immigration laws. Not this open border. I mean, Biden went after the border on his first day in office. He started putting out executive orders to open the border. And it's promoted because in a lot of municipalities like San Francisco and all across the country, they are allowing illegals to vote because there's no constitutional prohibition on it. Only 49 states in the country, only one state in the country, not the other 49, actually prohibit illegal immigrants from voting. So when I was in the state house, I authored two bills. One was the anti-sanctuary city bill, which forced these mayors and these bad governors to force them to release their ICE detainees if they had a detention waiver to ICE because they weren't doing it, which is what the sanctuary policy is all about. And by the way, we do it in Georgia, so we still need to reform that in Georgia. And the second thing was a constitutional amendment to say that only American citizens could vote in U.S. elections. Because the way our Constitution is written, it says that those who are a citizen and above the age of 18 can vote in an election. You see, it gives authority, it's not prohibitive. And so what they're doing is local cities and ordinances are passing laws that say you can be an illegal and vote, and the Constitution doesn't say you can't. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's wrong and it's shady, but that's the kind of practices that are happening. So that's the stuff we're fighting against, and we're trying to get that. Now, we need a Republican Senate. So there's lots of legislation like the H-1B reform legislation, and we have some other ones too. We have a bill that we're working on that is I can't remember the short title we gave it, but it's an accountability bill. We believe if you testify before Congress and you lie or you refuse to testify, that you should be immediately ineligible to be a federal employee. Instantly, right? And we're getting a bunch of pushback because they're saying, well, that's due process. I'm saying, no. If you lie, you should get tried anyway, but the DOJ sucks and they're not going to try you, so they're going to let it go. But you still don't get to get paid by the federal government if you're a federal employee and you won't testify honestly before the body designed for oversight. So we're working on that bill, and I got to tell you, it's similar to this other one, there's a lot of work to do, and it's going to take a long time to get the final version and to get the language right. Because what you don't want to do, some of the stuff is so nuanced, it takes a lot of member input, it takes a lot of work, and frankly, some of this stuff, you don't want to pass it now because it dies in the Senate anyway, and you don't have the refining time. And what you want to do is be able to refine the language so that it's absolutely untwistable by the left, because they're better at twisting language than anybody in the world. And so anyway, that's, I hope I answered that question. Oh, yes, sir.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I got my haircut from you, so.
We back. So, given the current tyranny of
Majority, a narrow majority helps fix those things, because then there's pressure, and you have to have a Senate. You have to have both chambers. Or at least one chamber that's willing to, Mike Johnson is the most conservative speaker we've ever had. No question. I've talked with him, I've sat in the room with him. The man is genuine, he's a believer, and he's conservative. I don't like the way it's gone since he's been speaker. So I have very big concerns and questions about the way it's happening. And some of that's because he wasn't expecting the job. And those who don't know the speakership, I mean, it's a massive organization to run as the speaker. You have a huge staff, personnel's policy. So some of that is growing pains. Another part of it is, he's thrown into a job, he's negotiating against Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden, right? Like, can we all imagine trying to sit across the room from Joe Biden and talk about even ice cream? Right? But to try to negotiate with him, I mean, it'd be like talking to a wall that, doesn't talk back. It would be very difficult. But then Chuck Schumer, who's, I believe, we all know how to believe about Chuck Schumer. He's an expert at manipulating and getting his way, regardless of what the laws say, and he's very, 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 very experienced at it. So that's a tough person to be on the other side of the negotiating table. We need to reinforce Mike Johnson. We need more members that have courage and are willing to stand up. When they ousted McCarthy, what was it, 6 people? 6 Republicans? Was it 8? That's not very many, right? So that the amount of even HFC members that stood together on that vote is not a lot. And I would tell you that kind of my last part answer the question, which I know doesn't. Here's what I can tell you about people like me. People that are, I obviously am going to join the HFC. I launched the State Freedom Caucus Network. I believe it's very much the core of the party. We don't do a great job at coalescing with each other. We have a tendency of beating to our own drummer and just charging forward with what we think is right. That's where I think the strategy comes in. There are a few members of HFC, and I will be one of them with HFC, that is willing to sit back behind the scenes and come up with a strategic vision and plan to achieve results. There are not very many members up there right now that are putting the effort and the work into the strategy. I was an Army strategist. And something I'll tell you, when you want the enemy to do something, first you need to know what they want to do, and then you need to shape the environment so that they think they're going to be successful at what they want to do, and then that's where you defeat them. When you try to push them into doing what you want them to do, that will never work. It never happens. The enemy will never cooperate and do what you want them to do. So that's the way you do it, is by the strategic vision, and you come out with stuff like, the next CR is going to come out, it's going to come out April, or let's use the Farm Bill, right? The Farm Bill is going to expire at the end of the year. It's a 5-year reauthorization. For those who don't know, the Farm Bill is basically a subsidy bouquet, right? It's just subsidies out the ear. By the way, America thanks you for your tax dollars. The Farm Bill loves it. Well, we have till December to figure out a strategy and a plan to make as many fixes to that as we can. Do you know how many people are up there that are talking about strategically how to address the Farm Bill?
Probably not me.
Maybe one, right? Maybe one. I've talked to one chief that maybe is trying to formulate, and by the way, they're in the formulation stage. So that's a problem. That's a big problem. You can't fight the shiny object in front of you today, right? And you standing by and here talking about it doesn't do anything. It riles you up, but it doesn't change the result. We got to get people up there that are willing to do the work behind the scenes, that don't just want to get famous, that they want to actually go up there and accomplish something, and that's behind the scenes. So. That answer your question?
mostly, but the thing is my observation is there's a whole heck of a lot more that can be done to defund the problem that people just seem to refuse to consider. And is it just a matter of there's just too many of them that go along and you just got to get rid of all of them?
No. So I'm sorry if I missed that question. everything in Washington, everything. Save Girl Sports, DEI, the woke agenda items, all of it comes down to money. Every single thing in Washington comes down to money. The power of the purse is the sole authority constitutionally of the United States House of Representatives. It originates there. But they're doing stuff right now. They're originating spending packages on riders out of the Senate to go around the House. So the House has got to stand up and say, no, we are the House, and be willing to shut it down. There are not enough members of the Republican Party that are willing to shut the government down to make sure that we get things done. We have the power right now. The U.S. House has the power right now to shut things down until we get a fix. For example, I was in a Chiefs meeting last Tuesday, and the conversation was about Israel aid. The members were split on Israel aid, just being 100% honest. Some wanted it, some didn't. The HFC position was to strip it out, because their fear is, we know that if they bring to the House, if they bring Ukraine and Israel and a border package together, there are enough pockets of each of those that it will pass easily on the floor. And we don't want that. I much prefer individualized bill. If you agree with Israel aid, vote for it. If you disagree with it, vote against it. But let's do it by itself so that you don't get to go home and make an excuse. Well, yeah, I voted for Ukraine aid, but it's because I needed Israel. Right? It's a cop-out. So we pushed hard to have an individualized bill, and they pushed that to the floor. Well, my comment, and some of the other chiefs agreed with me, was just like, we should say no bills, period. No Israel aid, no Ukraine, no underwater basket weaving, nothing until the Senate passes H.R. 2. We gave it to them in like April of last year. H.R. 2 fixes the problems at the border because it forces compliance. It's remain in Mexico. It does a whole bunch of provisions that have to happen. And it's already there, it's sitting in the Senate. So you just need enough members in the House that have the courage to say, we're not gonna vote on anything until you pass H.R. 2, period. Or your version of it, fine. But do a standalone immigration package that without all funding. By the way, the border is not a funding problem. The border is not a money problem. Right, so the Biden administration wants to tag money on it, because if they tag money on it, they can pay more people to put amnesty and to put asylum seekers in our towns and our cities. That's what they want to use the money for, not to enforce the border, not to send them back, but to actually push them out to you. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. You don't need more money. What you need is them to follow the law and the provisions of H.R. 2. Right, so it's all a ploy. So that's what you got to do, is you have to have enough members. And frankly, there just aren't very many members. In Georgia, you got, Andrew Clyde will stand up against it. McCormick will stand up against it. They're the only two that consistently voted against all the CRs. Right? I think Marjorie voted against the last couple of CRs, but the ones going all the way back, you just don't have consistent people that are willing to stand up and consistently say, no, we're not going to do this. And you guys got to hold them accountable, which is hard to do. Right? If 200 of you could vote out your congressman, right, it'd be different, but you can't. What other questions? Yes, sir.
We're gonna get to see a debate between you and Mike Crane.
I got to tell you the truth. I think that'd be the most boring debate you've ever watched, because it'd be like, oh, I agree with that. I agree with that too. Oh, I agree with that. That's my personal opinion, Mike. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, but I just can't get past this McCormick thing, because you said just a minute ago that personnel is policy. And if you are good on policy, then why is McCormick poor on many issues?
Well, we got other people that would like to ask the question.
Well, I'll tell you this. If I didn't want to have my own vote, I wouldn't be here running for Congress. I want to have a vote, and I think my voice matters.
It doesn't answer the question about personnel
No, it
being
actually
policy,
does.
though.
It actually does. So he has a vote. He's a congressman. I want to vote too, and I want to be a congressman, so I have a vote. Yes, sir.
When it comes to lying to Congress, it's a heavy lift to get somebody removed for it. We control the money in the House. Why don't we just take their salary if they're found to be lying?
Yeah, that's a good question. You guys all hear his question? He said it's a heavy lift to remove someone from Congress if they're lying to Congress. Why don't we take their money? So there is a way to take their money. It's called the Holman Rule. I was reinstated this Congress thanks to my Freedom Caucus friends. They fought for it in the rules fight. Actually, those who, if you followed it all, That was the final, not the one, that and the single vote removal, the vacate vote. Those were the two linchpins that finally got enough votes to get McCarthy elected because it conceded the Homan rule and the one vote vacate rule. What the Homan rule is, it allows you to put a rider on almost any appropriations bill to go in and say, Secretary Mayorkas is derelict of duty, we take the salary for the DHS secretary down to $1, or you could take it to $0. It probably wouldn't pass at 0 because it never has, but $1, I think that's sufficient. I mean, $1 is pretty much nothing. So, a couple of them have passed, just being blunt with you. I think there's probably been 30 or 40 since we've been up there, but they all die in the Senate. None of them happen in the Senate. So, and they have to be, they'll come out of conference committee out of the Senate and it will be gone. So now it's different if we have the Senate, going back to that Leffler-Purdue thing, we lost both those seats. If we'd had one of them, then all of a sudden we have the Senate, and all of a sudden these policy things that we're trying to drive change. That's why votes matter. Did I answer your question? Okay. But that was a good question. Next victim. All right, well, I'll hang out, and if you need anything. That's the old hook, but I'm going to say I'll be here. You can come in there, sir. I'll be here afterwards. I'll stand in the back. I do want you guys to meet real quick. You met Julie. Where's Spencer at? Spencer's right there. Everybody say hi to Spencer. And then Leanne. Spencer and Leanne are here, so just come talk to one of us afterwards, or Julie, which I know you all want to talk to Julie, but come talk to us afterwards. We have some flyers, we have some signs, and we'd love to have you guys support. But if you have any more questions, we'd be happy to talk to you guys. So thank you very much.
Final reminders for our next meeting will be 2 weeks from today, where we're having our caucus here in the church. We'll also be meeting next month for our March meeting at our regular time here, second Saturday of the month. And 2 weeks after that, we'll have our county convention. So this month and next month, I get to see y'all smiling faces at least twice in the same month.
Wow.
And in April, we're going to have our district convention. We're going to have to elect 70 delegates to the district convention. So we need all of y'all to come to that convention as delegates from Coweta. We get 70 delegates, 70 alternates. We're going to need about 80. We're going to need at least 80 to 85 people, closer to 90, who plan on coming, because y'all know how it is. Things happen. People don't show up. Now this year it's going to be slightly different, because if you sign up to come, particularly as delegate, and you don't, and you say, well, I can't come, whatever, or I don't think I can make it, then Ms. Debbie's going to call you and make you explain why, having committed to come, you're not showing up. And I think it might be easier to get absolution from a priest than to get absolution from Ms. Debbie. So if you sign up, you better show up. Haven't properly scared you. Thank y'all for coming this morning, and the work that we're going to be doing the next few weeks is very important. To close with the importance of this congressional race, remember that we have all felt great angst, anger, frustration, disgust with Ferguson over the last 8 years. Betrayal. Most of you were active some of you, maybe half of you were active when he first ran in 2016, when Ferguson was first elected, right? But how many of y'all have joined us, have come in since 2016? There's about half, right? More than half, right? Some of you involved before then, most not. The congressman, the Congress critter we've had for the last 8 years, you had to bear up under through a decision made before you even got involved. Some of y'all voted for him, not knowing. Some of y'all voted for Mike Crane, but just weren't active in politics back in the day when they were running. What we do this year in choosing our next congressman will determine, it's our one chance. Whoever gets in is only leaving when they want to. The realities of politics in America today is you get to vote for your congressman, one man, one vote, one time. After he's in, it's pretty near impossible to get him out until he decides he wants to leave. So it just depends, depending on how long they want to stay. They might want to stay 6 years, 8 years. They might want to stay 20 years. They're going to be in as long as they want to be. pretty much. Which means that this, potentially, this will be our only vote for a congressman, the only meaningful vote for a decade, perhaps two. We better get this right. There will be people in this room in 4, 5, 6, 10 years from now who will be either angry or happy, disgusted or delighted at the decisions and the work we make. We're small in numbers in this room, and the folks like us in other rooms around the district, volunteers, such. We're small in numbers, but because we donate, because we give of our time, talent, and treasure, we have an outsized impact on our circle of friends, and when we go out to volunteer for candidates. It is vital that we get it right this year, because, like I said, this is our one chance for at least 6 to 8 years, and probably for 10 to 20. One chance. It's so important we get this right. And, yes, ma'am, Ms. Mary, you had something?
I was just looking at my calendar. Can you go over the dates?
Oh, real quick, yeah, I'll make a note. Yeah, take out your calendars or make a note of that in your notes real quick. I'll do that. Absolutely right.
They're also on the website, on the calendar.
Go to CowetaGOP.org and they're all on the calendar.
Really?
You should see them all on the calendar, but I'll make a CowetaGOP.org, but I'll make a quick reminder here. The 24th of February, we have our precinct caucus. David Jenkins, who represents South Coweta, will be speaking there, and I'm sure others will also be signing up as well. Also, we have on March 9th is our regular meeting, followed by March 23rd, which will be our county convention. All the meetings will be at 10 o'clock. For all these meetings, the caucus convention will start at 10. We also have on April 13th will be our regular meeting, which will also be here starting at 10. Senator Brass is going to be talking about the session, which would have just closed at that point. We're looking forward to hearing from him. And on the 27th, is it 20th? Oh, it's the 20th. On the 20th of April is the district convention, which will be over at the Noonan Center, as it has been for the last several years, and elections. That will be over there. That's where you get a chance to vote for me and Miss Nancy, whoever else is voting. We're hoping for 2 of your votes. One for Miss Nancy, one for me, and the third one, vote for whoever you want. In all the years that we've been going to these conventions, Coweta County has only, where the majority of the Coweta delegation voted was how the ultimate convention voted on every single vote. The only time I could think of was one time. It was in 2016. There were 6 or 5 or 6 alternative slates of alternates offered, right? There was combinations of alternates, 5 different sets. And the Coweta one kept coming in first, Coweta Fayette. Basically, it was 2 people. It was a person from Fayette, a person from Coweta, I think another person from Coweta, who were nominated on the slate, right? So Coweta and Fayette were voting for that slate. So we came in first in every round until the final round when the rest of the district outvoted us. But that's the only time that's ever happened. Historically, every time when the convention has voted, if Coweta voted a majority in one way, that was the way that carried, because we have 70 votes and because we have a lot of friends and allies, not just in Fayette, but around the district. So in every vote except one, when Coweta votes, stands up and votes, the convention votes with us. So it's a very important responsibility to have in the leadership role within this district. And one final thought, there's a lot of discussion about immigration these days, but I think the simplest way that we can all relate to just think about the issue is the issue of our own communities. How many of us would be ecstatic at the prospect of 10 or 20,000 people from Fulton County moving into this county? No. We all know the policies that would accelerate that. Mass transit, MARTA being extended into this community, quote-unquote affordable housing. We all know what that's a euphemism for. We all know that. We feel no shame or compunction at openly opposing those policies because it would harm the community we like, right? We feel no shame whatever in saying, look, we don't want you to import Democrats into our community to turn it into another Fulton County. Then why should we feel any shame about saying the same thing at the national level? Why should we be ashamed of saying we do not want you to import people into this country who will vote for Democrats to do to our country what the Democrats have already done to states like California and New York? If it's okay to say we do not want outsiders moving into our community, bringing their left-wing voting patterns with them in Coweta, it is perfectly acceptable to say the same thing at the national level. And the only reason to not say it, in my humble opinion, is having not thought about it from that point of view, honest ignorance, just haven't considered the issue from that point of view, or complacency because somebody with a big check at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is telling you they want cheap workers and the Democrats want cheap voters and clients for the welfare state. cheap labor for big business, cheap voters for big government, and the country goes down the tubes. If we're against apartments here in Coweta because they're bringing Democrats, we certainly should be against open borders. Legal or illegal, it doesn't matter. If they vote for leftists, it's not going to make the country better. We don't want Democrats flooding Coweta. We don't need Democrats flooding America. And that, as Paul Harvey used to say, is the rest of the story. Thank you all very much. We'll see you next month.